Well, if you've got one lying around the house, you'll know that musicians often try to be cool, aloof and detached. The silent, mysterious gaze, the glowering, I've just killed my grandmother band shot. But this next outfit had a mini trampoline on stage and they aspired to make an entrance on a slide.
Supergroove were a good time band, a bunch of teenage friends who, with their infectious energy and perfect pop songs, captured the attention of the country. They were made a high priority act by their record label, which saw them tour the world from India to Germany. On returning from their tour, the band agreed to meet at their lawyer's office after a 1-month break.
The guys were all sitting in there around this big table, and it was basically a resignation. And they said, you know, can you sign this, dude? And I was like, okay. I had a look at it, and I sort of like realized that this was my resignation. And I was just totally shocked, and I was dumbfounded, didn't know what to say, and I just kind of signed it. And the stupid thing was like, I was signing a piece of paper that said I couldn't talk about it. You know, I wasn't allowed to speak about it in the media or anything.
I was there when Shay was kicked out of Supergroup. I was around there. I just thought it was bullshit. I was like, you guys must be out of your mind. Here's your meal ticket. What are you doing?
Why was Shay kicked out of the band?
Well, just because we were stupid. Everything was starting to crap out. And a really bad response to that, very sort of what I would have done to a girlfriend when I was 14 type response, is you start pushing people away, you know. It's a terrible mistake. I mean, on a personal level, I mean, you just don't kick people out of their band.
Yeah, I was bummed. I was bummed out. And the worst thing was like I was just totally unprepared for it.
Fortunately, Shay Fu had DLT's Chains to distract him, but at the recording session he didn't know he was meant to have lyrics for a chorus.
This was like my first sort of session with someone else. I didn't want to come across like I didn't know what I was doing, so I kind of like didn't have a chorus ready, but I kind of just lied to him and said, oh, I just need to go to the bathroom real quick. Went to the bathroom, just prayed and just sort of, you know, I need to come up with a hook real quick, came up with the Chains hook, and then went back in the booth and threw it down. Come make my chains, come break me out. Living in the city ain't so bad. Come make my chains, come break me out. Living in the city ain't so bad.
To promote the song, DLT and Shay Fu, along with record company rep Servia, were made to tour the country.
You got to drive around the North Island playing at shopping centres. I was like, what the fuck? So we did. We drove to, I don't know, Paraparaumu and set up our turntables and 2 speakers in the middle of the mall and then played the song. And everyone would be walking past with their shopping going, what the fuck? It was so humiliating. And then the funny thing is that 4 weeks later, it was #1 song, and we would go do it, and there was thousands of people.
Shay Fu has gone on to a thriving solo career, and Supergroove has since reconciled and reformed. 2007 saw the original lineup successfully tour the country. New Zealand thought of itself as a pretty harmonious country. In 1960, the South Africans invited the All Blacks to tour, but said the Māori players must be left out, and New Zealand agreed. In the same year, the Howard Morrison Quartet released a record about the All Blacks.
Myra Man's All Black had a huge impact. Musically, for all the wrong reasons, it was probably the worst record ever recorded. But in content, it actually struck a nerve. It was a semi-subtle protest, even though we didn't know it.
Cause the Springboks will be watching from Transvaal to Cape Town, the team that ain't got hurries to score their last touchdown.
Even the South Africans loved it. Notwithstanding the fact that no colours were allowed, no Maori were allowed in South Africa, they thought we were just having a jolly old hoot.
21 years later, when the Springboks toured, times had changed and their visit tore the country apart. But back in 1960, Morrison didn't even think it was wrong to sing the word Hoary.
But really, there were some phrases in that My Old Man's an All Black which were very indicative of a prejudiced view of who we are and who we were at that time.
The record sold 80,000 copies and stands as a classic piece of Kiwiana, but also a document of a bygone era.
How Great Thou Art, that's Sir Howard Morrison. Big at funerals, apparently. At number 30, a couple of pirates that took on the government and won, eventually.
In 1966, the Squares at state-owned NZBC ruled both television and radio. They decided when you would get to hear rock and roll, and that was not often. A group approached the government.
We went to them and said we'd like to start up a radio station, and they pretty much laughed at us and said forget it.
They figured if they could get into international waters 3 miles off the coast, they could broadcast legally. They got their hands on a boat called the Tiri and were about to set out to sea.
The police turned up and they lowered the viaduct bridge, and there were about 3,000 young people there yelling and screaming and supporting us, and it just turned into a minor riot, really. You know, we got jammed under the bridge of the viaduct, the crowd got hold of a rope, they actually pulled the boat free and all that. That was really exciting. You don't get to get into a fight with 10, 15 cops every day of your life, even though it wasn't that vicious. Got halfway out into the harbour, and then the police boarded the Tiri, shut the engines down, arrested us, brought us back and threw us in jail.
Eventually they made it to sea, and pirate station Radio Hauraki began for just over a year until a storm struck.
They broadcast a Mayday signal on the broadcast frequency, so obviously a huge number of listeners heard that and help went out, but the boat was a write-off. By the time we managed to tow it back to Auckland, our marine surveyor said, gone, can't use that again.
They quickly acquired a replacement boat and spent 3 years at sea before gaining a licence in 1970 to become a legitimate radio station, and they wanted to celebrate.
All the DJs were out there live. Most of the programs were pre-recorded on land and then flown out to Great Barrier and out to the ship. They went out and did this big party, last broadcast, sort of at the end of the whole era. And one of our DJs, Rick Grant, slipped on the way back and fell overboard and was drowned. That kind of, it wasn't the way we had really wanted the whole adventure to end. It would have been a hell of a lot better if we'd all managed to see it through and not lose him.
Radio Hauraki had brought commercial radio to the country and helped open up the airwaves.
Yeah, so in the space of 40 years, we've gone from 4 radio stations and very little choice to probably, I would think, New Zealand now there'd be more radio stations per head of population in New Zealand than probably any other country now in the world.
Bliss was released in 1980, after the Dudes had officially split up. It's probably no coincidence that the lyrics of the country's top drinking song are quite easy to remember.
We put Ya 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 on because we couldn't think of anything. and it just stuck, you know. And it seemed to be the only thing you could say, you know, when you're in that state at that time of the night.
Bliss has become a bit of a monster, hasn't it, really? It's hard to explain why that's happened. I mean, it's a great song. It's great to play it, and it's great to sing it. I'm tremendously proud of it, and it's great, you know, if you're at the cricket and you've got 30,000 people singing, yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's great. It's a great feeling. We'd been in Australia for about 3 weeks, having our eyes opened. So the lyrics were just what we'd experienced.
It was called Piss to start with, there's no two ways about it. And it was only later when we recorded it that Rob Aiken, who was producing, said, you know, it's a great song, but no radio station is ever going to play a song called Piss.
A touch more poetically, it became Bliss.
Once you've written it and done it, then it's no longer yours. It becomes the property of the people that listen to it. And they decided to make it into this big thing, so good on them.
After the break, we stop seeing eye to eye with our favourite band and a unique New Zealand musical genre that created two of our biggest superstars.